Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. There's something going on here, a gap, notably a permission gap. Nat, I'm curious, have you ever hesitated to wait and be invited to something rather than just do it?
I think have always been the first person to put my hand up, even if I'm not good at something. I was always a person in any situation. Oh yeah, I'll try that. Oh yeah, I'll do that.
Even in unfamiliar territory?
I mean, like you've seen me, I'll pick up golf, I'll try anything. I'm not afraid of being bad at stuff, and I'm not afraid of trying something new and failing, but I think it's just because I have always had to. I mean, we've talked about this before. I traveled around the world as a kid. I was always the new kid, so you just always kind of get used to going, if you're not putting your hand up, you are stuck without any friends or anything to do. What about you?
Possibly an environment that is slightly different, or I feel new, or as a beginner, I might observe initially and then wait for an invitation to be involved. I recall finding my feet as a new director and being the only woman in a group of men directors. And my assumption of protocol is that you go through the sections and everyone gets a chance to speak. And so I was kind of waiting at the end of conversation to be invited to give my 2 cents. And it never came, and they moved on to the next section. So I remember having to call out a few times, are we moving past? I just want to add my cents here. And it was like I was asking permission to give my 2 cents. And it took me a while to find my feet. And now I actually have to just butt in to be heard. Like I cut someone off, and I often have to do this in meetings, is I do find I have to be quite dominant. I do have to cut someone off and insert my voice in order to be heard. Because if I just sit and wait for someone to go, Kristen, what do you think? Which I think is the chair's responsibility and protocol. What I've realized is it never happens.
That's a really good point, because you sort of uncovered there that something we advise people to do all the time is if you want all the diverse voices in the room to be heard, you actually, as the meeting facilitator, have to actively work to make that happen. Otherwise, it will be loudest voice wins. And even your explanation of that sort of showcased how problematic that can be and how it ends up with people having to dive in and interrupt rather than a much more productive conversation where everyone has their voice heard. It also did remind me, I spoke to someone the other day who does sort of a 101 on what to expect in a board, which we're going to bring into PowerSuit at some point as a mini masterclass, because it's funny how we go into all these brand new situations assuming what the situation is going to be and often are shocked that it's quite different. And I think the reason I'm so strong on saying I'm not this is because I feel like I always notice when other people do it, and I'm always really surprised when they wait for the invitation, because I'm like, who's that invitation coming from? And this comes from even like friendship groups where someone will say, oh, no one invited me. And I'm like, well, no one invited me either. Someone just said they were going. And I said, cool, I'll come. Sometimes it's that like this expectation, and in my head, and maybe it is because of my life experiences, I'm always like, why do you put the work on someone else to roll out the red carpet for you? It's not their job. And I think in my head, that's how I've really reinterpreted it, of like, take the work off other people by jumping in rather than waiting for them to have to really make sure you feel safe and comfortable. Granted, that's not true in every situation, but I think sometimes social situations, it's a bit like, well, they've organized the event.
I wonder, and it's interesting because I was chatting with a friend who has a daughter who felt really uncomfortable asking permission to go to a festival with a group that was going, because she was not on the outer, but she was on the edge of this social group. And it feels much nicer to have people invite. And yes, that requires work upon the organizer to go, have we forgotten anyone? But I can see both perspectives. There's work for that person to go, who might feel left out. And no 19, 20-year-old is thinking that way.
Yeah.
But then equally, I know that feeling of not feeling included and being on the edge of a social group and desperately wanting to belong and be invited. And so a little bit is that social awareness, but also I do think there is a thing of us wanting to belong, and being asked to do something feels really nice.
I agree. And I think that this is one of those great examples. We did a mini masterclass last week on different strengths. And I think I'm probably a real instigator. And so for me, I'm probably the one doing a lot of the organizing. So my strength leads to some challenges, which is you're constantly doing the work And then people go, oh, but you didn't include me. And I'm like, when have you ever invited me to anything? Like, what have you organized? So I think it's a really interesting example of different strengths and how you can quickly jump to perceiving being in the victim. Like, I see myself as like, why do I have to put on the work? Other people see themselves as, why didn't I get invited? Whereas instead, if we kind of go, oh, actually, if you are someone who's not an instigator, your job is to sometimes make it be really clear when you say yes or no to something, especially if you say no, why you're saying no, and really enthusiastic about next time. Because I think sometimes if you're always being the invitee, you forget that the person putting in the work just gets a no from you after all that work. I'm not saying you do this at all, because you don't do this, but I have noticed that sometimes people will say no 3 times in a row and then be like, but I want to be invited anyway.
It's interesting, when you were chatting, you brought up some trauma of me not being invited to be a bridesmaid or a maid of honor. Isn't that weird? I know.
Really? Were you not invited?
Well, I felt I always navigated on the edges of social circles at school because I was really involved in sport, and maybe I felt like a bit of an outsider. I have no idea. It doesn't matter. That's just how I felt. Like, I didn't have a group. I had a bunch of social groups, right?
You're still like that now. You still jump between.
Yeah. And so I feel like I always had best friends, but I wasn't their best friend. And so when it came to the wedding season of all of us being in our 20s and getting married, I was never the maid of honor, but they were, do you know, and fair enough, I can only do one maid of honor. But I did notice that.
Yeah, those things.
I did notice those weird things of, I would have loved to be invited to that. That just, it was so weird that has come up for me. But equally.
That's so true though. And I think those things, that is, as we get older, we realize, firstly, you saved yourself a fortune, by the way. But secondly, is those miscommunications that can grow. I think it's like a friend of mine said a while ago, and she was what I wanted to model my life on. She lived in New Zealand 6 months of the year, and then UK 3 months, and New York 3 months. And she said one of the interesting side effects is she stopped getting invited to stuff, because the benefit of living her lifestyle was that she was everywhere and she was able to do all this cool stuff. But the downside was that the people who stayed and really connected, she was suddenly on the outer. And it's funny how each of the decisions we make in life lead to different negative and positive implications. But like we've talked about a lot recently, those negative implications hit us twice as hard. And so we focus on them. But yeah, no, it's so true. And I feel like maybe it's just, and it goes back to strengths strengths and experiences, because I feel like I was always the new person. I was always left out, that I think I just never took it personally. But I think that's because I was always new rather than feeling outside. I literally was on the outside. So I never thought people were deliberately excluding me. I just knew they didn't know who I was.
Yeah, no, and you have a good way of not taking things personally, which I would suggest I don't. I'm not great at that. But I think we do it in the workplace as well. And a recent win for me is I wanted always to have one board role, just have one on the side. And I was getting frustrated because I was putting myself up for, this is over the past 5 years, future of directors, and I would apply through the normal channels. And I think of people who apply for jobs through the normal channels, and I would get rejected, and I'd take it personally, or I'd get down to the final 2 and be all bummed because I didn't get that role or this role. And my husband said to me, why don't you just phone this person up? I know her, do an intro. She sits on a bunch of boards, and just tell her you want to be on a board. And lo and behold, I got on a board by doing just that. This is a couple of years ago now. And I thought, isn't that interesting that I was given permission to ask for what I needed, and lo and behold. And it wasn't through the traditional channel of competing against 100 other people.
That's a really good point, because I spoke to someone the other day who was sort of looking to break into a totally different industry and quite new in their career. And my girlfriend said to him, oh, you should chat to Nat because she knows the person hiring. And when he texted me, he was apologetic and embarrassed because he felt like it was cheating. He thought it was cheating to get the connection. And I thought that was such an interesting insight into maybe why we do sometimes hesitate and wait to be asked, is we are afraid of taking up more than our fair share, or that we have found a shortcut that feels like it's cheating, where actually it's how a lot of the world works, and just no one told us that. Like, no one had ever told him that jobs are largely found through networks. So here he is diligently applying for job after job after job, as you did with the board positions. Meanwhile, other people are networking their way into the jobs, and he feels like he's cheating when he does that. And I just think if anyone's listening feeling the same, it's not cheating. It's the way the world works, because it's about building trust. You want to hire someone you trust, and the more touch points you have that indicate that you can trust them, the much higher likelihood it's going to be that you want to hire them.
Thankfully, that's what we're addressing a lot at PowerSuit in the membership network. Interesting that you, Nate, told that story of a guy, because what research shows is that women often hesitate. The permission paradox is that women hesitate to claim authority they've already earned. So, for example, 63% of women report needing explicit encouragement before putting themselves forward for promotion versus 37% of men.
And we actually hear this all the time, don't we, from allies who say, but I had to literally go and shoulder tap her, and then she applied and got the promotion, but had I not shoulder tapped her? And they're like, why? And I actually have a theory on this, maybe rightly or wrongly, but I posted about this on your LinkedIn. If you don't follow us on LinkedIn, please do. We do some fun stuff on LinkedIn, and one of the things Kristen posts every Friday is our Friday wins on LinkedIn, and there's a bit of a conversation starting as people start to share theirs. My win for the week was I met this mother. Well, she wasn't a mother when I met her, she was just a woman I met, but turns out she was a mother, and her daughter was in the workforce, and her daughter's in this cool role, and so she connected me to her daughter, and I was like, it really struck me. This is the first time I've seen nepotism, but not really. But this idea of your family or your parent is helping pull you up through your career as a woman, because we are the first generations that we have women in positions now that as their daughters come in can actually help them up. And I think the guy example I had, his dad wasn't in a professional industry at all. He has no one who has sort of been on his team helping him with that stuff. So he missed that education. Whereas I think for a lot of men in professional areas whose sons have come up, and maybe their daughters, but probably primarily their sons, they've sort of given them that permission and shown them through action how that all works. Whereas we've all missed that. And so sort of gender aside, because I don't think we are that different, but those of us who've missed that modeling of behavior don't know it.
To your point, and on this whole trust and relationships, is men initiate. They're 46% more likely to initiate a relationship and ask for a reciprocal relationship, whereas women, of course, are waiting to be approached. And on that, the modeling, I think, is really important. But there's socialization effect research that is, and we talk about this in one of our talks, is that girls are often rewarded for following rules and waiting their turn and acting a certain way. And so classroom studies shows this cultural messaging of good girls wait and they're patient and they're quiet, and this is what a good girl looks like. And I even noticed it, and boys will be boys is another thing. So I noticed it with, if my son is being naughty in a doctor's office and climbing over everything, it's like a boys will be boys, where little girls are taught to be good. And I notice this for anyone who has a baby, or when you approach someone with a baby and you ask, is it a good baby? Is it quiet? And does it not cry? And, oh, that's a good baby. There are social norms around genders and what it looks like to behave.
I agree. And I just wonder, I think there's that, plus I think the modeling, and I think the modeling has just really struck me recently, because I even think amongst people, and I don't know if you get the same, I think women are doing it more, but the number of times I'll get an email from a man in my network who's mentoring a younger woman or someone, and they make the point of connecting us and saying you should talk. And I think it sort of just goes to that point again, if they may have grown up having a parent or watching their dad have lots of mentees and offer opportunities to his friends' kids. And so it just feels like a normal part of what you do. Whereas if you've raised as a woman and you haven't seen that and haven't been exposed to it, you don't actually know that that's what's happening.
It's an interesting point to work more out loud around our children and to talk about, I don't know, just the simplest things of where we're spending our time. Grayson is hilarious. He's thinking of maybe business school in the future, and he walks in and he's like, so what do actual business people do? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, I hear you on calls all day. And you're like, thanks for joining, everyone. And he was mimicking us. And I said, we are selling. He's like, is that what you're doing? And I was like, we are selling. So that's what business people do. Okay, so I think we can safely say that women historically have waited for permission before asking for what they've already deserved and or is already sitting on the table waiting to be taken. So I think that's everything from mentoring to bonuses to professional development budget. There is a genuine consequence to waiting. So by the time we finally do get around to putting our hands up or asking for what we need or what we want or what is well deserved, the opportunity is already narrowed. Someone's already put their hand up, and a red flag would be that you feel really resentful that that person got that, but you didn't. Had we taken control and it clearly communicated what we wanted, what our next step was, then we would have been possibly in the running as well. So I think there's real opportunity cost to waiting. This is the consequences.
Yeah, I agree. So I feel like we've sort of gone, the rationale behind it is we didn't know we should, and we feel like we should be waiting. But I think the second part with that opportunity cost and the reason behind this is we're afraid of being told no. And I think that kind of ties in a little bit to the being a good girl of like, you're getting in trouble or like, it's awkward or really uncomfortable to be told no. And I feel like using the promotion example, and actually even the social example, you're worried that people are going to reject you, really. It's a fear of rejection if you just were to say, hey, I'm coming along. And I think it's the same with the promotion. They're worried someone's going to say, no, you're not ready, or you're not going to get it. When you think about that as the opportunity cost of waiting, is you're not going to get it regardless. If you don't do it, there is a 99% chance you're not going to get it because you are putting all the balls in someone else's court, and that person has to know to offer up the opportunity to you. Even if they're just like, oh, well, I just assumed you already had earned it, so you didn't want it. Like, which is quite reasonable for your manager to just assume you don't want it if you don't put your hand up.
Maybe if we reframed it as possibility of short-term pain versus longer-term more pain. And what I mean by that is over the course of a lifetime, not putting your hand up to negotiate a pay rise or asking for the role you want or communicating the expanded opportunities that you'd like or, effectively taking stuff off the table that's there to be taken. I think that's much more long-term pain, seeing other people succeed when it should have been you.
And when it comes to like an opportunity and we're worried about someone saying no, the worst case there, let's say it's a promotion, you're not ready. They say you're not ready yet. Your next step is to say, what's between me and being ready? And then you've got your next plan of action. Again, there's actually no downside there. The downside is this one tiny moment where you go, where I thought I wasn't where this person thought I was. That's it. And that's actually ego kicking in to go, I'm preserving my ego by not trying, because if I don't put my name forward, I can sit back and think, nah, I definitely deserved it. I just didn't try. And that is your ego trying to protect you. Whereas if you put your name forward and you get told you're not quite ready, that's okay. Like, that's actually not a harm. That is you going, okay, what do I need to do? Or maybe I'm not making my work as visible as I should make it. But either way, you've taken a step forward and it hasn't actually hurt you. And I think this probably comes back to a mindset thing, but it is very much like how do we retrain our brains? And we're both hugely into that, to go, we know our gut instinct or our natural brains are wired to really fear this stuff. So how do you turn it around and have those mantras so when it happens, it doesn't hurt as much?
I've got an idea, and then I would love for you to share an idea. So one thing is, and we talk a lot about this, in order to change our behavior, which is action, we have to be aware firstly. So my suggestion would be start to build awareness around your language. Feels like things we use every day. So I've got a board meeting this week. I'm going to start to be aware around the language I use when I have to insert my voice and make sure that there's no permission-seeking phrases in there. So I was wondering if might be an example, or would it be possible? Or I hope it's not too much trouble, or I might start with an apology. Sorry, I'd just like to. So I think permission-seeking phrases, awareness of that is a cue that we're waiting for permission rather than just taking our space with our voice and our space, changing it to, I've decided to, I'm planning to, I'll be using this. And then also full stop trick. So replace any question marks with full stops.
The second one that I like, and this probably goes back to the sort of getting out of your own head and putting yourself in someone else's head. And there are some exceptions to this. There are some people who are massive includers, who spend their lives looking out and offering up opportunities. Most of us don't, though. And the reason I say that is if you are waiting for other people to invite you, stop and think about how regularly you've invited other people. Have you been inviting everyone else to step up for a promotion? Have you been reiterating and reconfirming with people for social invites? Whatever it is, if you're not doing that behavior, you can't expect it of other people. And that's not to say we all need to do it. It's just to say retrain your brain to realize it is not other people's jobs to invite you, because we don't. We're all too busy and we don't have time to. Most likely, unless that is a real strength of yours. So if you are waiting for that invitation, reframe your brain to go, it is not someone else's job to invite me. I don't always invite other people either. That's cool. That's how the world should be. It is my job to step up and ask for it. And I find that really helpful, because I don't think I've always felt like this, but it has really helped me over, I don't know, probably the biggest time I remember was when I was 11 and landed in London and, walking around school on the first day and was like no friends or no anything. And I just remember thinking, why would anyone else care enough to invite me? Like, I have to go in and do it. And I feel like that mantra really helps. So rather than thinking, I wish they'd asked me to lead that, go, I'm going to ask if I can lead that. And just really change that way of thinking about, if you catch yourself saying, I wish they would ask me, or why didn't they ask me, to instead go, I'm going to offer, or I'm going to put my hand up.
And then I'm going to add one mantra on top of that. I know this is powerful because a lot of women that went through our power sessions, our Power Suit pilot program, use this mantra. The minute their feet hit the ground in the morning, they had sticky notes up by their laptops, up by their mirrors. I belong here. I am incredible. My perspective matters. And we actually have to start retraining our brains to our worth and value.
It's the same thing with no. The more little no's you get, the less scary they become. Nowadays, I'm very comfortable saying to someone, here is my offer. Here is my ask and my offer. So would you like to come and do a mini masterclass? Here is what we'll give you in return. You are allowed to say no, and I will not hold it against you. And I think there is an element of, you just get so comfortable going, oh yes, some people are going to say no, and that's okay. Like, we have to do this all day, every day, because we're constantly bringing people in and asking for connections and all of that sort of stuff. And you do start to find that the more you do it, the less an individual no hurts. And you notice this, if you've ever met a salesperson, they do not care about no's. In fact, they force a no, because they just go, great, the no is the first response, and let's go back. And they are just so trained that muscle that it's just not even, it doesn't hold them back at all. Whereas if you are afraid of a no and avoid them, you have not trained that muscle, and everyone's going to feel really big. So we're going to start with one thing on that front. What is the one thing, Kristen?
Well, I think we should identify one area that's available for the taking. Start to retrain that muscle with something that is probably on the table, professional development. We have been in this business for almost 2 years now, and we know that on average, there is around between $500 and $1,500 per employee in every organization. And our suggestion is that is one on the table area for the taking, is professional development budget. And then another option, it could be a growth opportunity. So this is something you've been thinking about, you wish you were on that project, or you'd like to contribute to that meeting, or this full day strategy day, or this, whatever the opportunity is. There'll be something that's on the horizon that has piqued your interest. And our suggestion is to commit to action this week. Use the appropriate language of, I have these skills to contribute. I'd like to be involved in this way, or I've identified this opportunity. I'd like to use the budget for this purpose. Just assume you're going to get it. Assume the yes. And go and ask for something you need this week.
I love it. And I think on the professional development side, we have a template to ask. So we will post that template. Please use it. It works. People adapt it, obviously, and it works. And with the growth opportunity, it doesn't have to be big. It could be even you want to deliver the next all hands update. You might want to deliver the project update. You might want to come and observe a meeting. Whatever it is that you know will take your career forward and build skills.
I have a quote. It's from Joseph Campbell, who's a renowned mythologist. Did you know that's even a thing? It's a thing. There are such a thing as, when I grow up, I want to be a mythologist. Good old Joe said this: your authority isn't something others grant you. It's something you claim for yourself.
I love it. I mean,
yeah.
scarily from a mythologist, I'm like, is this person who's like just made up a whole industry?
Anyway, it is not a myth. You can go ahead and do that today. So please take your action. Take the thing that's already on the table and go ahead and just get it today.
We'd love to hear what you asked for, what you put your hand up for. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
how you did it. Like, it could be conversation, it could be a chat, it could be a social thing, whatever it is. We'd love to hear what you asked for, and kind of bonus points if someone said no, because I think we need to sort of normalize that a little bit.
I think I can create a poll. That's how people can do comments. Great. And we know the number of you that listen to us. So our expectation is you're going to take an extra minute to do this.
1 million people.
Obviously. Anyway, thanks so much, everyone. We'll chat to you next time.
Bye.